Hello. Welcome to the Eddie Conversation Podcast. My name is Eddie Vigil, and I am your host. This is episode number 49, and joining me today is Hana Wu.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for being here.
Oh, of course.
Coming to this nice cabin environment that we're chilling in right now.
That's pretty sweet.
Yes. I have moved again. I don't know. I haven't really. Whatever. That's okay. That's beside
We'll
the
get to
point.
it.
Yeah. This is. Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Now I'll just jump right into talking a little bit about you. Context. Who is Hana Wu? Is the question. I think of you as an actor.
Yes.
Would you like to expand on what else? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say mainly I am an actor right now. I used to be a therapist. I worked as a psychotherapist specializing in trauma. And then I quit all of that to pursue acting. And I've been doing it for about 5 years now.
She's playing chords while she's speaking very. Yeah.
And also, I see myself as now a martial artist. I've been training in wushu, which is Chinese kung fu, for the past 3.5 years now.
Nice.
So it's become a lifestyle. And yeah, I think I kind of sort of live life right now incorporating all three of those, therapy, wellness, mental health, acting, storytelling, and kung fu.
There we go. That's Hana Wu, everybody. All right. So you mentioned therapist. What? Remind me again, because I was playing with the chords. What field specifically? You said psychotherapy, or what?
Yeah, I mean, psychotherapy is sort of the general. I have my license in marriage and family therapy, but funnily enough, I didn't do any couples counseling or much family. I mainly worked with individuals, adults, teens, and kids. And I did a lot of work in trauma, in gender-based violence, so sexual assault and, abuse in relationships. So,
Right.
intense stuff.
Yes. Okay. So we'll keep that in the back of our minds as we talk through everything else.
Okay.
So let's start with the nice easy stuff here.
Before we get
Hana
so
Wu.
hard.
Hana Wu. I haven't seen you since potentially we were doing a little bit of a little promo shoot for a little movie, just so I can, plug from the beginning. It's What's on the Inside was my feature directorial debut.
Yes.
You acted in that.
I did.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
So it was a very small cast, and you were like one of 4 main actors, and this was back before you went SAG. It was like right before you went SAG, right after, essentially. I feel like that was the case. Yeah, it was pretty soon after.
I feel like time now just doesn't really exist for me, so I'm like, I don't know, but okay.
Yeah.
Wow, so that was before I joined SAG.
Yeah, so it was before you joined SAG, and it was my first year in Los Angeles, and I was plugging away at trying to get this crazy thing done. Yeah. And it was lovely having you. And I know you still have this on your Instagram profile too, where you have your description as therapist turned actor.
Yeah.
And I remember that grabbed me because our movie was about a life coach, and not that life coach isn't a therapist, but there is overlap on handling and interacting with individuals. So I'm like, oh my gosh, she could be that was an awesome, cool thing that I'm just, yes, that was that. What, just for funsies for me, because I know this movie was a super tiny movie. I think back on it and even just wonder how it happened at all and how I got through it, like how this movie even exists. But from your perspective, how was it for you?
So Eddie reached out to me through social media, and we struck up a conversation, and he um, asked me to audition. And so it was one of those things where it's always like, wow, you're as an actor, especially starting out, you're trying to get your name and your face out there. You're trying to get to know people, and to have people sort of see something in you, whether that is like a little something in your bio or whatever it is, and then reach out to you, that always means a lot. So um, for me, it was like, wow, the opportunity to audition for an indie feature. And I had read for another part originally.
Mm.
And then Eddie invited me to audition for the role of Susan. Um,
Right.
and then after I sent in those self tapes, he wanted to meet in person. And I think I really got this sense that um, Eddie wanted to get to know me, like more than just like as an actor, like for his project, like he wanted to get to know me as a person, and he wanted to see if that was like a good fit. And I think I really appreciated that, just even within that first meeting, because we met up at a Starbucks, and we just talked about project. We talked about like a little bit about our stories, and our approaches for like film and being on set. And I thought that that was such a great way to get started on a project, to get to know someone in that way, someone that you're going to be like helping to tell his story. So and then filming was a lot of fun. We would have like rehearsals, and then we would get together and we would like just knock this thing out. And the thing that I love about indie filmmaking is just like you just get in there and you like crunch it out, and there's so many things like happening, but you just like all work together to make it happen. And it was really a lot of fun because it felt like a very supportive and safe set. So I really enjoyed my time
Okay,
working on
cool.
it.
Thank you. I'm glad she said that and not that
And not.
that it was a horrible experience. All right. No, cool. I recall the coffee meetup as well. Mostly my takeaway from that is I remember like I showed up and I'm just like, if she seems like a great person in every interaction. Like I kind of had somehow, I don't know. For me, this was a very specific little project that, yeah, you really need people that fit personality wise with, I mean, as a director too, that's kind of the objective is you just want people that you want to
Mhm.
work with and that kind of get you and you get each other.
Mhm.
Because when I'm on set a lot, I like to speak in shorthand methods or like I'll just kind of finish half sentences and usually the actor is able to pick up what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
So stuff like that is super helpful. But I
Mhm.
remember at the end, too, like I showed up thinking, all right, like I really want to cast Hannah, and unless she says something terribly wrong, the plan was to just ask you on the spot if
Yeah.
you would be, if you, like it's like I want to cast you,
Mhm.
and put the ball in your court, if you will. Luckily, it's worked out, and I've enjoyed keeping in contact, and
Mhm.
I don't know, and yeah, because that's my thing too.
Yeah.
It's great to be. That came out just last. It's been, I don't know how long it's been. Time is a
I
thing.
know time I just don't know anymore. But yeah, it came out
This year, okay, it came out this year.
this year.
I thought it came out last year. No, it came out in April of 2021.
Mhm.
We filmed at the end of 2019.
19.
Phew. Okay, either way.
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's always it's a big deal to finish something and have it come out. Like that's a big deal.
I
A big
agree.
deal.
I agree. Thank
Mhm.
you. It's always important to celebrate. Let's continue on. So I don't know. I don't recall what else I had to say. Okay, no, what I was gonna say was I did recall that I said I wanted to cast you, and I
Mhm.
remember there was like a little bit of surprise on your end where it didn't seem like that's what you're expecting me to say, and I was like, oh, cool. I was like, yeah, I kind of half assumed, like, I don't know how often, or even these days, or back then, or time is irrelevant, but like meetups with creatives, I don't know how often that's a thing, and how often those kind of end in sputter, but nothing really comes of it. But that's kind of the vibe that I got, was like, oh, this isn't normally how these things end. It's like, but I don't know.
I think for
And
me, like well, number one, like I don't typically meet someone. Like I mean, I've had coffee a couple of times with other creatives for like kind of a potential thing. So I think going in, I never usually expect, I think as an actor, you just sort of have to be very, very open and go in without any expectations for outcomes. And so I think that's just always how I sort of approach things, because usually it's like, to get cast, it's the typical way. You submit, or they ask you for an audition, and then through, for me it's been mostly through like emails, like,
hmm
okay, either I don't hear anything, or
yeah,
I get an offer through an email.
yeah, because I think that's the more traditional route for sure.
Uh-huh.
Of, hey, let's have coffee, let's feel this out, but I need to think on it because I'm talking to 20 other people or what. I don't know how.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, well, this was great. I'll get back to you. I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
rush into any decisions.
Mm-hmm.
However, I don't know. I lean into gut a lot for sure. And I mean, that's kind of the job of the director too, is like make decisions, make them quick, and
Mm-hmm.
trust the gut. And then, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know why more people
Yeah,
don't.
which I appreciate that though. I really appreciated that, because the communication with, and it's been kind of this way. It was this way throughout the whole production, where the communication was very clear. I wasn't left like wondering, or I never felt like I couldn't like say where I was at also, or like where we couldn't talk it out. And I think that was also,
Yeah.
sometimes it's like the freedom to be able to communicate and to say where I was at was
hmm
also very cool.
Yes, and since I don't know, since we're on the topic of it's what's on the inside, really quick, and I feel like I've gotten enough distance from it, being that we shot it so long ago and it's out and stuff, and I like to try to break down a little bit of the like I like the transparency with other creatives that might be listening about. It's kind of a little bit of a pet peeve when filmmakers pretend like it was the smoothest project ever and there was no issues whatsoever
Mm-hmm.
and every decision was the most confident decision of my life. Like all that kind of stuff is like, no, that's not really, especially in indie.
Yeah.
There's hurdles everywhere and there's doubt and there's like, am I communicating? Well, so the thing that I want to bring up with you
Mm-hmm.
is that was my first writing, the first feature that I had written,
Yeah.
and and the lesson that I came away with was I have since then written with a co-writer
Hmm.
because I felt going through that process was like there's lots of holes I saw and there was too much on my plate as a producer director that I didn't really have the energy
Right.
to go back and just go into writer mode and fix stuff. So I'm like, it is what it is. I'm going to trust my cast to make decisions. I'm going to trust
Mm-hmm.
me as a director. At the end of it all, the issues that came up in writing never quite went away, and they were really hard to work through in the edit and stuff. I'm like, oh, it's still here. It's
Hmm.
still an issue. I wish
Hmm.
writer Eddie would have solved it. Um, so when it came with directing you, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
um, the character of Susan, um, and even like Gary, or like they're big supporting characters that affect our main character a lot. But it was vague on what Susan had going on in
Mm-hmm.
life. And I remember like early rehearsals, we're trying to like you were kind of asking about, I don't know, we're trying to, I think we're talking about what Susan was up to, what she had going on, and why she was acting certain ways, and I just didn't
Yeah.
really have proper answers, I felt, because I hadn't, I didn't flesh her out in that way. So then I'm
Oh.
curious, I don't know if you recall much of the prep or how you handle the situations where maybe uh, you're cast in a role that maybe n- needs a little bit more, like I don't know how you handle adding on to a canvas that you've been handed, let's say, a partially painted,
Yeah.
and then the rest is kind of put on you, and you're just expected to kind of like make it work.
Right. Well,
Which,
I think specifically for the role of Susan, I there were some things where I was just like I wasn't really sure what was what was her backstory and how was she taking certain things. And so I think in just like the prep and learning the lines myself and like understanding her scenes, um, as an actor, I typically do a lot of imagination. So I kind of like make stuff up. And if I really have like a question where it's like, I don't know if, the director is going to have a thought about this, or if they already have like the answer in their head. So I think what was really helpful for me was actually going through those rehearsals. And it's funny to me that like it never came across to me like you didn't have those pieces fleshed out, because I felt like you always had like you always kind of like knew, or even if you were sort of like when I would ask, or when it would just somehow organically come up in the rehearsal, it seemed like even as it came up, you were already thinking through, like, okay, well, what is going on here, and what is this specific aspect of her story? So I always felt like, okay, you did always have an answer that gave me something to now put in the scene.
yeah, I think I don't disagree. I feel like it's the classic collaboration thing where it's helpful for me as a director, especially in my first time tackling that much, where I'm like, all right, great. Like you're bringing ideas to the table, and then once those are placed on the table, it assisted me on kind of jumping from that and either being like, do I like this or do I not like it? And then that kind of, gets all the other thoughts going, and then that creates a more confidence on my responses when it's not like you don't have any ideas and you're just like,
Mm.
hey, neither of us know what's going on here. It's like, no, you have an idea
Yeah.
and I have an idea. So I gave you the script, you came with something which helped me give you something.
Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah. And it's kind of and I love that collaboration process. I love like getting to play during rehearsal and be like, "Oh, this is maybe it's
Yeah.
not what I was thinking coming in, but like now how do I
Mhm.
incorporate that into my understanding of the character, you know?"
Right. And I do recall definitely being on the verge of floundering at certain times. And then like but that's kind of the fun part of just filmmaking in the first place and just getting like your reps in and you
Mhm.
become more confident in your instinct and your decisions. But I do recall some stages where I'm just like, an answer's not going to come, and then it comes at the last second, and then I say it,
Mm.
and then it's like,
Mm.
oh my god,
Phew.
whew, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
almost lost the faith of my entire cast and crew that I was
No,
close.
no. But well, I think that's really interesting too, because you talked about how, as a filmmaker, especially indie filmmaking, like a lot of times you almost feel like you can't talk about the challenges or talk about like how hard that process was. I think it's kind of the same with actors, where you feel like, wow, so many actors talk about a role as though they like they were it, and they were like they were that role, and they had that confidence the whole way through, and they just knew about their character, and and for me, like a lot of times it's like, every time that I get a role, there's always a little bit something inside me that's like, can I do this? Can I pull it
Hmm.
off? Like can I do this character justice to what the expectations are, and I think I get that sometimes with certain roles, we can feel very confident, like, oh, I get this role. But I don't know, more often than not for me, maybe because I've done so many like indie roles. So like I've really been had the privilege of trying multiple different kinds of roles, like never typecast really, So for me, it's always like a little bit of that, like floundering, like potential, like, am I going to flounder, or am I going to be able to get this, and am I going to be able to pull it off? And I think that that's part of what makes filmmaking so exciting. you know,
is always
is
putting
the potential to like fall flat on your
the
face, but
potential.
then like to try it and go for it anyway.
Yeah, I think if you're not really, I think that's inherent to the process anyway. If you're the challenging of thyself and taking stuff you're not comfortable with is a part of the process,
Hmm.
unfortunately. So therefore, it's gonna be there forever, and it's gonna be lovely.
Lovely. So lovely.
Becoming the class. What's the quote? It's like becoming be comfortable in the uncomfortable, or whatever the thing is. Like that's kind of how
Hmm.
I see it.
Hmm.
Is if you're not uncomfortable, then it's just like going through the motion and it's not interesting.
Hmm.
Becomes work. No, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying. Great. I wanted to talk a little bit about. I don't know. This was before It's What's on the Inside, I believe.
Hmm.
But you shot a film in China,
Yes.
and that was that was pre It's What's on the Inside,
That
right?
was pre What's on the Inside.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So I recall we hadn't really talked too much about it. I remember it coming up on set or something, um, but that I don't. Okay, can you give context on what this is? How? Because
Yeah.
I remember hearing about how crazy the production was and the working hours, and because you're on screen a lot and there's a lot for you to do. But
Yeah.
what's it called? And do you mind? Can we
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about that
we can
one?
talk. So it's called 5 Cent Life, and it's basically the story of Ling Zhao, who was a political dissident, like back in Mao's communist China, who ended up being imprisoned and executed, basically because she criticized um, some of the policies of the Communist Party. And so you can imagine that this was a very, in a lot of ways, it's quite a controversial story, and not that many people really know about it. I certainly had never heard about her before this project,
Hmm.
came to me, and so this was my first. It was my first feature film, and then it was my first lead. And so going in, like, talk about not being sure that I could do it, especially such a role, right? So
Hmm.
um, and we were going to shoot in China. So like being in a different country and shooting this like completely challenging, where I felt a lot of pressure to like do justice to this person in history,
Hmm.
but also to do it for my director, who had really given up and sacrificed a lot of her time and years of her life, and was taking a big risk in making this film to begin with. And so, yeah, we ended up shooting 27 days in China, and it was 14 days straight through. We had a couple days break where we traveled. So we had one day of traveling. We flew to another city in China, and then we shot for another 13 days.
Woo!
And for me, it was like because I was the lead, I was in almost every scene, and I was on almost every day except for one day. So it was a pretty intense schedule, like getting up early in the morning for makeup. Like my call would be like 4:30, and sometimes 4:15, and because it would take like some time sometimes to
Hmm.
transform. Not that I was basically we were being transformed, like, or I was being transformed from like ages 16 to 36,
Yes,
essentially.
yes,
Yeah.
which is a whole thing on its own.
Which is a whole thing on its own.
Yeah, because I recall watching that. Because I did watch it, and it was very
Yeah.
cool, and it's quite a. I don't know if the word. What's the word that people use? Jeez Louise. I mean, it's like it feels like a very large scale production when you watch it because you're in these like incredible locations,
Yeah,
and
the locations
there's
are amazing.
quite a like just the number of cast members sometimes seemed
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of people
Yeah.
with background and stuff that was going
Yes.
down.
Yeah.
Um, and I still can't find the word. I was trying to stall on that. Where, what's the word when, because 27 days is uh, a short amount of time it's kind of a decent amount of time for an indie, I'll call it.
Yeah.
But it's also, they are trying to get a lot done in a little bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
And the word is on the tip of my tongue, but I'm going to forget it and I'm going to give up on that word. So how did this... So it's very cool. First feature film, you get to be a lead and you're just just thrown into it and you
Role
have
of
to...
a lifetime, really.
Yeah. So how did that come about? Like, how does that... So you were friends with the director, or they knew about you, or
No,
how did this go?
I had originally someone had sent me the breakdown on Actors Access saying, you seem like you would be a good fit for this role. The thing is, that particular role was not, the character description was not the description for the actual character. So I actually thought I was auditioning for a completely different story, completely different character. And I thought that I was given like those dummy sides where it's like it's just a scene, but it's not the actual scene for the film.
Mm-hmm.
And so I read for it, and I got the call back, and I came in and I read with another actor, and it really seemed like the director and the casting director really liked my performance, and I got a meeting with the director. But at that time, like I was still really green,
Yeah, yeah.
and usually it's like when you meet with the director, you want to, like, this is what they tell you, right? You need to seem like very confident, like, of course I can do this. I will. And but I was like, I'm like, this role scares me. And I but I said, like, I would, if I got it, like, I would work so hard, and I would give everything that I could to be able to play this role. But I think I still conveyed like a lot of hesitancy and a lot of self-doubt. So in the end, it actually didn't go to me. Um, Someone else got the part to begin
Oh.
with. So I was like, okay, so I lost this role. And then a few months later, the casting director came back to me and asked me to send in one more tape, which I did. And then they decided to cast me. But what was really interesting is that in between the time that I didn't get the role and then the time that they offered it to me, I had worked on another few projects, one of which filmed in Hong Kong. So that was like the first time that I flew out of the country to work for something. And then I did a web series that required a lot of dialogue. So we did like 5 episodes. It was the kids' table, and there was a lot of dialogue, a lot of back and forth. And so in that time, I sort of gained the confidence and the skills, to be able to tackle something, like it kind of gave me the
Mm-hmm.
stepping stones to be able to do this. So looking back now, I'm just like, wow, like it's really incredible how that happened, and that whole thing where it's like, what's meant for you will not go by you, like I feel like I can now look at that experience and be like, no, that's how it happened, like somehow I
Yeah.
don't know. But even like at that first table read with the cast, like the director said, you seem different. You seem different than when I had met with you for coffee, and you
Mm-hmm.
seem this very unsure. And I was like, yeah, I think I am different,
Yeah, yeah. No, that's no, that's an amazing story. How you weren't ready, and then you were ready, and it all worked out.
Yeah.
But so that just straight up just through like a submission through like Actors Access. That's cool.
It was just a submission.
Nice.
You just never know
Yeah,
how
for
things
sure.
come to you. You never know.
Okay. And then
Yeah.
let's see. I know I want this is kind of more on the story of the movie itself,
Mm-hmm.
but I do recall, and this was an interesting thing. I forget where I heard it, if you mentioned this to me directly or if this was through promo of the movie or something. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, the movie takes place in China. It's
Mm-hmm.
shot in China, but everybody speaks English, right? And that
Yes.
was purposely done, from my
Mm-hmm.
understanding,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know how this would have come down or who makes a decision or how this happened, but the decision to shoot in English, if I'm correct, was because China, they wouldn't allow the shooting to happen if they wouldn't let the filming happen if they didn't want it to be mistaken as they wanted to be obvious that it's a fiction and this is like a narrative experience, or how does that
Well, I
work?
mean,
Where's
I
it go?
think there were two reasons, I think, as was told to me. One was that um, because this is still a controversial figure, um, it was very hard to, like, the original script was in Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
So it was meant to be filmed in Mandarin, at least at my director's original conception. But it was really, really hard to find um, native speakers or like actors in China who were willing to tackle this story because um, they just didn't know how, yeah, like China would respond. Like we didn't
Right.
know. And so because it was so challenging, and also because they wanted to have like a wider audience, and you know, like that, they just decided like maybe we need to translate this into English and make it with English speaking
Mm-hmm.
actors, and so when I came on, like I didn't know that like originally it was going to be shot in Mandarin.
Okay.
um, but it what was really interesting about the prep process for it though was that, like, because my director wrote the script, right? So she knew this script front and back. She knew it so well. When she was directing me, she would actually say the lines in Mandarin from the original script. And the original Mandarin would give me so much more meaning and
Mm-hmm.
depth than the, because a lot of times it's like really hard to translate word for word, right? Meaning for meaning from like any language, I'm sure, to another language.
Yeah,
Like you
because
lose some of that cultural context, you lose some of the meaning in the words itself. And so when she said, and even though I'm like my Mandarin is not
mm-hmm. I was
like
gonna ask.
great, right? But still, I knew enough where when she said it to me, like I was like, oh, like that's what's behind it. And that was really powerful to experience, actually, that like to be able to connect with like my mother language in that way that I had lost a lot of,
Mm-hmm.
over growing up in the United States and not using it. Um, so yeah, I mean, it was interesting because we were telling a very, very Chinese story in English. But because like when we shot the film as well, like it was like sometimes there would be a mix too, because there would be Mandarin speakers speaking in the background, and a lot of the songs and the chants and the,
Mm-hmm.
like that would be in Mandarin. So it was very interesting,
Yeah,
like to have that like kind of just coexist in the film.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I always took it as like, oh, don't worry, China, this is not a documentary because it's controversial. It's like
Mm.
this is
This.
obviously some sort of retelling in a way where it's English. This is a movie. It's not. So they're. I don't know. That's kind of how I don't know. Because I know how much China can influence story and like the higher budget stuff that they want their stuff to open in China and like so I know that's an aspect of the movie biz that I haven't had the chance to really work in, but I thought that yeah, either maybe it was just it's just the internet. I don't know.
Yeah. So in some ways, like a lot of us knew going in, like, that this was a risk, that production could be shut down. I think some of us like kind of just had that awareness, because we were shooting in China and using like a Chinese crew and a Chinese production company. So I think we kind of knew, but also speaking in English, like it allowed us to be able to film without, because a lot of the crew didn't know, like they didn't understand English. So they didn't
Oh,
know what we were filming really, and they did, I think they did think that we were, and it was like we're telling it in a very narrative way, like not documentary style. So yeah, there were a lot of complexities going in.
very
Um,
interesting.
yeah.
Wow.
Well, and even now I'm just like, I don't know if, I would, if how China would feel about me telling this story now, like I don't know. So
It's only one way to find out. I'm just kidding. No. Yeah. It's that's a whole thing. I guess let's jump into a little bit of, I don't know. It's always a, can we what is there to tell on the how you survived that project? How does that how did
mm,
you how did you do it? How did you do it and play all the different ages? Like how did you balance all that, and what how did you yes, how?
I don't really know. All I know is that like once we started going, I remember having this thought like, oh, I can do this because I'm doing it. So going in, I think I really tried to prep myself as much as I could. So like
Mhm.
all these supplements, I had my melatonin, I had my Unisom, I had like sleep aids, I had like all of these things to try to keep my body healthy, and making sure that I ate the like meals, like all meals of the day. So really guarding your physical health,
Mhm.
it like that was so important to me. And so like sometimes like because of my schedule every day, like sometimes we would, because we started early, so we would finish around like 7:30, 8:30 sometimes, and some of my cast members and the crew would like go out and have dinner together, and they would do like these sorts of things, and I just couldn't. Like I knew I needed to take every spare minute, that I had to decompress or to prep for the next day or to just have like that alone time, because I'm also
Mhm.
I'm an extremely introverted person, and so I need my alone time. And so in a sense I gave up some of that, like, cast camaraderie, because I just needed to focus and I couldn't break focus. Um, so before we actually went to shoot, I think so much of it was preparation, right? So like bringing all these supplements into China with me, and
Mhm.
but also like making sure that like I had my whole entire script memorized. Like I had, and we had done like, I think we did 2-3 weeks of like many rehearsals, a few weeks before I
Nice.
flew out. So we had those rehearsals. So I knew going in like what the scenes were and what I where I needed to get them to, um, and then yeah, having like all my scenes like committed to memory already, like so that I knew them, so that when I got there, because like I think like any set, and in particular an indie set, um, things come up and there are script changes, and then there are like, oh, you gotta swap this around, and so you just have to be open and ready for whatever might come up, so that I found that the more prepared I was, the more I knew my scenes, my lines, the quicker I could adjust to like whatever
Yeah,
needed to be adjusted to.
because you're getting thrown probably a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with performance, right? It's like just logistical switch ups on, like, we're doing this scene, no, we're doing this next instead, or the blocking adjustments, or this isn't happening, or this character didn't show up, we're doing that. Like, I don't know, just the stuff.
Right,
I
right,
don't know,
right.
just
Well, yeah, there's all of the technical stuff, and then there's just like, oh, something isn't working about this scene, so we need to, and that's thankfully like my director, and the DP, they were very good at like problem solving on the spot and saying like, we need to
Great.
change this up, we need to change that up, we need to do this to make it work, or this isn't working. But some of it was performance too, because
No, for
I mean,
sure.
this was such a hefty role. And, even going in, like, however prepared I was, like, it was still my first big role. I was still like, can I do some of
Yeah.
these scenes? They're so challenging.
'Cause I'm trying to not a joke. I'm trying to imagine too that you're also playing like different ages throughout the day as well. Like I don't imagine it's like, or maybe it was luxurious enough where it's like today is just you said 16
to 36.
to 36.
So, yeah, well, there was some luxury in that aspect, where they did try to have some of the earlier, because like just in terms of hair and makeup, because we
Right.
had an incredible team. For my teen years, like they would, because I had to have like, I had bangs, I had like hair extensions for the braids and all of that. But for the teen years, they would like smooth out like all of my crow's feet, and they would like underneath the wig, they would like yank basically gave me like a facelift with my hair, right? And then they tied it all the way up, and then they put the wig on top of it. And so like genuinely, like for the younger years,
Right.
like it looked different because I look like so I think there were a few days where it was like some switching back and forth and some, makeup hair magic going on. But we did have the luxury of just like sticking with like, okay, this day is going to be all,
Teen or whatever.
yes. And then,
That sound
and then
yeah.
the later, like the 30s were all like basically in the last few days of
hmm
shooting.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about I'm a big fan of Marvel
Mm-hmm.
Studios,
Mm-hmm.
and there's their recent Disney Plus show, WandaVision. I don't know if you watch those shows, but uh, she the show takes place over like multiple decades. Like they're flashing back to different
Yeah.
sitcom eras and stuff. And why am I forgetting her name? Who plays Wanda? Do you know? Do you know
I
even?
didn't watch it.
She is an Olsen.
Eliz-
Elizabeth Olsen.
Elizabeth.
So she was talking about how I think she was saying that she was open to having her hair be the authentic hair that's used in the show. Like she was going to dye her hair or whatever for the
Mm.
thing. But because there were so many because they're jumping decades so often, her hair
Yeah.
varies so much that they went wig. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the only way that they can get the
Do it
process
quickly.
efficient enough. So I was just
Mm-hmm.
thinking about the indie version of that on how you don't really have necessarily the luxury of a full hair department that's got these, whatever. It's a little bit
Mm-hmm.
different. So I was like, great, it's okay, cool. But
Yeah. Well, we did, we had, it's funny, there were some pictures. I don't know. I lost a lot of my
there's some
pictures because I
pictures.
don't know how to like keep pictures when I switch phones. So I've sadly lost a lot of my behind the scenes photos. But there were, there would be like a couple of like main people who did the makeup and hair tests, and then they would do the initial work in the mornings, and then there would be like three other hair and makeup artists who would come to set and actually like take care of me.
Yeah.
Yeah, like for the whole day, which was so amazing. But yeah, sometimes they would have to like do the switch, take out this wig, or do, because it's so much to keep track of, and then it's challenging to go from like scene to scene if you're, like with jumping through time, all of
You're
that.
like, I was just 36 and I have to be 16 with pigtails here or braids. I don't know. You didn't wear pigtails, right? That's
What's the difference between pigtails and
I do
braids?
not
I don't
know. The
know.
whole point is
But
you
I
have
had I
yeah,
had the two.
yeah. I think those are
Yeah.
pigtails too. Um, okay, yes, great. I was gonna ask on how much that helps dictate performance too, or if it gets in the way. Like when you have all that stuff going on with your face and they're yanking stuff and they're pulling stuff and they're like, all right, you're a teen. And then you gotta get out there. if it's like distracting, or if it's like, I don't know how that plays, or how it's just part of the job, but
Yeah,
it
I
is.
mean, in a sense, it's part of the job, and as it's happening, I guess, I mean, you kind of it's still movie magic, even though you know how it's happening. You know how it's being done. You know what they're doing to make it
You as
happen.
the
Like you see it,
actor.
yeah, yeah. But I feel like even as they're doing it, and then you're seeing your face transform or your hair look
Okay.
different, I do feel like that does. It's part of the process of getting you into that character, and then once you're on set, it's like, yeah, you have to do your prep, and you got to remember, because you're going to be in your body and in your mind differently as a teen than in your 30s. And so you do have to have that focus, and then sometimes the director helps you, like reminds you and brings you there.
Hmm.
So, but I feel like all of that helps, like hair, makeup, the location, production design, like when you're in that setting, like all of it helps you, it transports you, so that even if there is like a boom here and they're trying to get like the mics going, and like like, okay, you have like one part of your mind that's like, this is technically what I'm doing, and then the other part of your mind that's like, this is my character, and this is,
Yeah.
so yeah, lots of,
Lots of brain activity going on there.
yes.
I was gonna say, I guess just to close this off, but I do like, I do imagine that location, that the external assistance of the location and just hearing the language actually being in China does,
Mm-hmm.
like if you were trying the same thing in Los Angeles and the whole crew is speaking English and you can
Mm-hmm.
just walk off the set and you're at Starbucks, right? Like that might be a little bit of a different approach to get you back in the zone versus actually being there. Probably was
Yeah.
super helpful.
Oh, for sure. Because it's also a period piece, right? So, like, just even the sets, like, we shot at some places where, like, they just have these sets that different productions can,
Hmm.
like, use. And they're, like, legit. They look like old China. And it's very cool. And when you see everyone in their costumes and speaking Mandarin, and, like, yeah, it just kind of takes you, it helps transport you into that
Yes.
setting. It was very cool. It was very cool.
Quite the experience.
Yeah,
Lovely.
it was very cool. It's so
Great.
weird to go back and talk about it because we shot it in 2018.
Yeah.
So it feels like
Nice. It's been a
worlds
bit.
ago, lifetimes
It's
ago.
been a bit. However,
I
it's not that really that long ago, too.
know, it's true.
All right. I'm looking at my list here, and
Mm-hmm.
I am wondering, um, let's stick with acting for a little bit longer here.
Okay.
For other actors out there, like you did a whole profession shift,
Mm-hmm.
um, switching into acting, um, and now you've been in it for a while. Like I mentioned, uh, or we've talked about, you've done plenty of non-union indie stuff, and you've jumped to SAG, and just kind of, and we're about to jump into a whole nother year too. So
Mm-hmm.
2022 is right around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
How has your approach changed
Mm.
since jumping in? How was it in the beginning, and then like what are you doing like the approaching acting just in general, like
Yeah.
jumping into and looking at next year, let's just say, is a
Yes.
vague topic.
So, yeah, when I first started, I was because I was coming into it late. Um, I just I was like, I have no time to waste. I just gotta try it, and I just gotta do it, and I gotta be open to whatever to learn this craft and to learn what I'm supposed to do. And so even as I started my first acting classes, I was on Actors Access submitting, doing non-union projects, doing a lot of like student film projects, and almost everything that was offered to me, like I would do. And I think I learned a lot through doing. And I think the attitude that I have and the feeling that I had towards acting and even the actor's life, because even though I was experiencing still plenty of rejection, I was just so in awe of the entire process and so in awe that I could actually get to do it. Like I never thought that I would be acting, that every tiny little thing I was like 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 I was just like, and then I would post about it like this, I auditioned here and I had these thoughts about it, and and now looking back I'm like, I'm sure the stuff that I posted was so like signaled to like the veterans like how green I was. But
Right.
honestly, I kind of miss that because I was just so enamored with everything about it. And I miss feeling that kind of joy, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I, no, I is there still, yeah, can you, I think you could still feel that, right? You can still be enamored. You just don't have to post about it
Yes,
and reveal,
you don't have to reveal every
but
single thought and
no.
every single rejection and every single. Um, but I think like there was an innocence about it,
Yeah.
that you
Now it's just another trip to Netflix. No
to
big deal.
sort
Yeah.
of lose. Well, I mean, because I think also during that time I felt like I had a lot more control because I didn't have reps yet. I was submitting myself and I was just doing whatever, and it felt like I was taking the steps and the necessary action to further my career in whatever way, right? So I was taking
Hmm.
classes, I was doing, and it seemed like every single project that I did would give me a new skill that I could bring into the next thing, into the next thing, into the next. So I could see like this, at least movement, this trajectory, until the time where I joined SAG. And then you get to a place where you
Yeah.
realize like um, you realize like what like the bigger industry that's not indie, and that as much as I like adore indie filmmaking, there is this sense that like the industry at large doesn't give you credit for the things that you do, like unless it's like network or studio, like those are the big things and those are the things that count. And so I think as when you're hit with that as an
Hmm.
actor and you feel like, wow, I've had these amazing experiences, but none of it seems to count.
But it's like, how many guest star roles have you done or whatever like that?
Zero. No, like, like, and then you're just like, oh man, I can't even get into these casting offices, much less get cast in like a co-star role. And I think it's just like it, the reality, I think, of the industry and how it works can be like, it's kind of like a bucket of ice water dumped on your
Well,
enthusiasm.
because it's weird. I mean, it's weird
Mm-hmm.
because it's the same way on the crew side, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think about being a script supervisor, let's say,
Yeah.
and in the indie world, it's crazy. And you're
Mm-hmm.
like, wait, we're shooting with 3 cameras, and everybody's like hustling through the day, and like, we're trying to cram this stuff in. We're shooting 12, 15 pages, or, whatever the crazy thing is. And then, uh, I don't know. I don't know. Like, there's that potential doubt of like, well, a union world, like you can't work union jobs because you gotta. But union jobs are easier because you're shooting with 1 camera and you're shooting 5 pages that day and you're spending 5 hours setting up for this one shot
Mm.
versus the indie, like you're just blasting through 40 setups in a day.
Mhm.
So it's like actually it gets easier as you go up. And like as an actor,
Mm.
um, I mean the pressure is more because there's more money at stake and all that kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
like I think about the guest star, co-star, like I always have to get explained like what the difference is between like how many lines does the co-star have, how many lines does the
Mhm.
guest star have, recurring, supporting lead,
Yeah.
and then I'm like, well, if you had you've led a feature film and you've worked this many hours, you've done this many scenes, and you did it amazingly. You can look at the stuff. And it's like, well, but we don't trust you to say two lines on camera in this one scene. It's kind of weird.
So it's hard because like that that's the reality that you're dealing with, right? So
Hmm.
this is the industry as it is right now. And one of the most challenging things, and this is where, the mindset comes into play, where you have to understand and you have to know that you have to be able to separate yourself and your worth and your dreams and your goals and your esteem from what sometimes from how it seems like the industry values you, so that almost takes more of the work, because I think, all of us, there have been exceptions where some people are able to they hit something, they get that break, and then they're able to, but for a lot of
Hmm.
us, it's we might hit a stride and we might get land a really cool project, and then hit those ceilings, and you don't know how to break through. And so I think even after I did that film in China, like then I just couldn't. I had such a hard time finding reps, and I'm really grateful for my team now. But I had such a hard time finding reps that I felt like I gelled with, and then getting into those rooms, and then all of that. So I went through, and then COVID happened, and then
Yeah.
the industry
Ugh.
shut down. So it felt like any momentum that I had coming, I had started to build, just sort of
Yeah.
and then you're just so having to start over again, and build new connections and try to get into casting offices all over again. So it's really challenging, it's really humbling, because you hear about those stories where it's like, oh, actors don't, they book one thing and then they don't work again for another 2 years, and you're like, that's not going to be me. And it's like, oh no, it's me too,
Yeah.
and you have to ground yourself in your own self-worth, and knowing that you are not what you book.
All
Basically,
right.
you are not those, um you
Yeah.
know
Can you talk about finding your reps and getting your team assembled? How that played, and because I'm always very curious about 'cause, um, the imp- manager and agent. Is that
mhm
specifically what you're referring to? Is
mhm
my assumption.
mhm
Who came first, and how did that process go, or how was the sifting through? Like I don't know how any of that works. But I always know actors are trying to get them.
yeah. Honestly, I'm gonna say I still don't really know how any of this works, because it's been a really challenging process for me, and I don't know if it was partially the timing, or just maybe the way that I come across sometimes. Because when I don't know someone, I tend to be more quiet. I tend to be a little bit more when I'm comfortable, Eddie and I have known each other for a while, and I can just come
Yeah.
and just chat, and that's fine. But a lot of times these first meetings or interviews,
Hmm.
they're and so it's very hard for me as an introvert, as a socially anxious introvert, to be fully myself in a first impression meeting. And so much of Hollywood, they look at that, they give you a certain amount of time to make that impression and to impress. Every audition is like that basically too, right?
Hmm.
So you're given these moments to show who you are and instill confidence that you can do something. And so sometimes that's something that I'm just constantly pushing up against, because I'm maybe not as uh yeah, I don't
You're you're yeah. There's not that natural inclination to just be wide open and
mhm.
comfortable in an instant like that. That
Especially if you're being judged, right?
Well,
Evaluated
yeah, and you're
for
internally
something.
knowing what's going on, all that kind of stuff. That
Yeah.
makes sense. That's a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
work to, yeah, like you said, the wall, break through that or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So for me, how I got my manager is through Talent Link. So that's a service through Actors Access that basically they'll send your profile, your resume to like all interested uh, management companies and agencies. So if they're looking for someone and they're looking through, your headshot might catch their eye and they might look through your materials and then they would reach out to you if they're interested. And my manager, Leslie, she, at that time, because I had used it like several times, but that time she was the only person who communicated with me and reached out to me, but also referenced very specifically my reel. And then I also knew that she repped someone who I think very highly of in the industry, one of my favorite acting teachers. And so and she was willing to take me on, during the pandemic, like at the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was,
So
yeah.
this has been a while now, and I think like it took a while for us to build this relationship that we have now, where it feels like sometimes like it really feels like it does feel like a team. It feels like a collaboration. It feels like we can communicate and like it took a while to get there, because I think a lot of times, I'm sure other actors too, it's like when you get a rep, like you're kind of like, how do I please this rep and how do I like make sure that I don't get dropped or what am I supposed to do, like the rules that I'm supposed to follow. And then when you can get to a point where it's like an actual relationship where it's built on like trust and respect, like it feels very special, at least to me. Like I'm very grateful for it. And then my agent, I was referred to by another director that I worked with, because he's also an actor, like writer, actor, director, multi-hyphenate,
Nice.
hyphenate. And so he referred me to his agency.
Writer, director,
Writer, actor, director, producer.
and an agent.
Oh no, he's not an agent.
Okay.
But he referred me to his
He
agent.
referred you. His agent was also on this. Okay.
So yeah, he referred me to his agent. Because I would say like one of the reasons that it's been challenging for me to find an agent is, people would tell you like, oh, like email everyone, or, back before in the old days, like you would send your headshots and your stuff, like kind of cold email people. And that never worked for me. And then even sometimes when my actor friends would refer me to their agencies, like it would be a pass. Like, and so, yeah, that's why I say like, I don't really know how any of this works, because sometimes I just feel like you just try stuff and then you get to know people, and sometimes they refer you and it goes somewhere, and sometimes they refer you and it goes nowhere. And so I have no answers. I'm very sorry. I just know how it happened for me.
Right.
Yeah.
So you landed your manager early in the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, because that's the interesting thing for me too. Because like from my mind, being a non-actor, but the same relationships could occur on my side as a director with having manager and agent and all that kind of stuff too,
Mm-hmm.
which I look forward to that day as well.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like, I wish being an actor is really hard. But the whole actor trying to please a manager relationship versus the two-way street that you sounds like you've gotten to, where it's more they understand me and I understand them, because technically like you're the one that can hire and fire a manager just as well as they could let go of you too, right? You could, so
Yes, you could also end that
yeah, if
relationship.
they're not putting you out and they don't listen to you and they don't respond to emails and they're obviously not. But I don't know if they don't see you and they don't put you in positions to succeed, then it's like, well, why don't you have to please me as well? So it sounds difficult to manage and build that. But how did you build your relationship, or what are your thoughts on that? I
Well,
guess.
for me, like it does it. I know myself, right? So I know it does take me a while to build relationship with anyone, especially if it seems as an actor who a lot of times it feels like we have very little power, right? Like we have very little power and we have very little control in like a lot of the business aspects of the job. And so it's very easy to get into a mindset where you feel like these are the hoops that I need to jump through, so I need to do that, even if it's something that, you know, doesn't feel right, or I don't want to do, or, it even causes me to compromise my ethics. So, but you also feel like because you don't have that power and it feels like everyone else in the industry that you have to go through has more power than you, it can feel like you can't assert yourself. That if you assert yourself, then someone's going to think you're too difficult to work with. Someone's going to think that, you're
Mm-hmm.
lazy, or someone's going to think that, like, all of these things that go through our heads, right? So that's where it comes, where you're just like, it's a process of learning who you are as an actor and who you are as a person in the acting world, so that um, you can begin to practice asserting yourself. And so for me, it was like baby steps and saying, like, being able to pass on certain projects, or not projects, but a lot of like more like auditions if I had a reason to. Um, and then also my manager also like checking in with me, like, is this something, like, just let me know. And then when I'm able to assert my boundaries, having that be respected and learning, like, okay.
Yeah.
But building that mutual trust too, right? Because like I feel like it also took me a while. Like, I needed to show my manager that I was a hard worker, and that I am, like, I'm willing to work. I'm willing to like put so much of my energy into things,
Mhm.
so that when I do say no to something, it really means something. Like, it's not because like I'm just like, it's just whatever
Yeah.
and I didn't feel like it. It's that, like, no, I think through these things, and there's like a reason. So
Yeah,
there's that mutual trust that we
for
built.
sure.
Yeah.
I was gonna say because it is hard to there's a lot of talkers in this town.
Mm.
A lot of people that talk the talk.
Mm-hmm.
So I get the apprehension to, well, yeah, you're saying the same thing every other actor says. Every actor says they want to work hard and they're going to do the work, but then
Mm-hmm.
a lot of them don't, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
aren't consistent. So I get the time is the way to show it, is the consistency, and showing up over time helps build that rapport and whatnot. But I also think about I don't know, I guess the reason I'm so curious too is I have heard too many stories from actor friends of like them getting calls from their manager and being screamed at,
Mm.
and they're just like terrified to do something wrong and lose their manager, and the
Yeah.
manager uses that leverage in the relationship to talk down to or get
Mm-hmm.
mad at, because these auditions can be crazy where it's like stuff comes up the last second and it's like a
Mm-hmm.
really big thing, and then the manager's pulling a favor for you to even get you this audition, like whatever the thing is, and then it's like,
Yeah.
well, I don't want to do it, or I'm busy right now, or like I'm with fam, whatever the thing is, and it's like, are you gonna do the work or like it's just
Yeah. The lesson is, it is so complex, and there's no like, so yeah, it's hard because sometimes, like, even if you have like a really great relationship with your manager, where something will happen, and like, it's a relationship, so you're gonna, like, maybe you're gonna frustrate each other sometimes, or you're gonna, like, not be able to meet each other's expectations. There's gonna
I
be
don't know.
disappointments. I think that maybe the difference is like,
Don't yell at people.
yeah, don't yell. That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like, don't yell at
It's not productive.
people.
It sends the wrong messages too. I mean, the message is heard,
Mm.
is I am mad, and I wish you would just do this thing that is would be good for me. But
Yeah, and I mean, we hear those stories, right? Like, I see them
I hear them
on
all the
Twitter.
time.
I see them on Twitter more
Oh yeah.
than like other social media platforms, where people are beginning to talk about, and not just like in terms of like, it's just, it's something within the industry, right? Like, sometimes you hear it about like a lot of PAs getting yelled at, and like you just hear about how like there are practices of abuse, and there are abusive dynamics and abuse, like the ways that, like, and that is in our industry, and that's rampant, you know, and the more that people are beginning to talk about it and beginning to push back and say like that part of it is not okay, like we
Yeah.
can find different ways to communicate that, you know,
Yes.
hopefully we can change it
It's a
more.
classic trickle down effect deal too, where producers breathing down the AD's neck to get the job done. The AD takes it out on the PAs, or their second AD who takes it down on the PAs. It's just the the human bully system, the hierarchy of
Human bully system.
so
Yeah.
that's it's a common theme on this podcast is be kind.
Mm.
Just lean into making others feel good and seen and heard versus uh, giving them a hard time for things that are potentially most likely out of their control.
Mm.
It's kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Either way, so you have an agent and a manager now, and you're in SAG, and uh, and it's a new world. Um, I don't know. Is there anything to how are you looking at next year?
I think next
Just
year is more and more of the same. My lesson is always like let go, detach from expectations of outcomes, because you just
mm-hmm.
don't know how things are going to happen. And you just have to be open and let things happen and guard yourself. Take care of yourself, take care of those around you as much as you can. And try to stay true to your own values and your, you know, like hold on to your integrity with everything that you have. So next year's, I'm just expecting more of the same, just more auditions, and, you know, hopefully something happens. Hopefully getting to work on more collaborations with friends, you know, like when
Heard.
those other things, like, yeah, don't, when the other things don't happen, but if you can keep working with friends and just creating together and, um, putting into practice the kindness stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like creating a human kindness system, you know, instead,
Yeah.
then, you know, then you're still contributing, you know, to the industry as well as your own artistry.
And to your friends, all that good stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I always think about because this, as mentioned, this is episode number 49. I imagine in the future when I'm on episode 500 or whatever, I'll be looking back and thinking of, because the weird when you look back on life and you think about the random connections that kind of hit. I was like, oh, I worked on this movie where I met this one person who 5 years later brought me onto this thing that did this for me, or whatever. Or I always think about, it's a classic. This comes up in conversation when I'm hanging out with filmmaker friends a lot, was, collaborate in making stuff. And then the, the, what's the term? Rising tides. A rising tide raises all ships, or
Mm-hmm.
so I just say I always dream about the day that I have my 5 year plan, and I've got 2 years left in it for my end goal for working for Marvel in a director capacity. So then
Mm-hmm.
I imagine, let's just say hypothetically speaking, in this moment in time, uh, I'm doing my Marvel thing, and I'm able to either cast or get like somebody in the door there on some sort of part on my Disney Plus series,
Mm-hmm.
or just me being a part of it at all. Everybody's already going back in my history and watching It's What's on the Inside, or watching my other projects that I've produced in the meantime. Like, oh my gosh, they discover people through that. Like, that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
how, cause that's what I've noticed, the trend in Marvel specifically, with like a director will land an actor who will eventually get cast in a Marvel
Mm-hmm.
movie, like Simu Liu
Mm-hmm.
for Shang-Chi. I know some indie filmmakers that had him as like a supporting role in their movie, and that got more attention because he was in it, and then that
Mm-hmm.
got bought by HBO Max or like all that
Mm.
kind of stuff. Where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, cool. Now they're in the sphere, or
Yeah.
the classic thing where you never know who
Exactly.
just keep
Yeah.
making connections,
Yes.
keep having great interactions. Okay. Yes. I don't know. I don't know why I said that anymore. I lost my train of thought. Let's jump to. Let's talk. I want to get into this via social media.
Mm.
Um, you are on Instagram and you are on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter.
We don't follow each other on Twitter. I don't believe. I don't do anything on Twitter anyway. But so you.
I do. I'm on Twitter. And I mean, I have Facebook,
Do you
we're,
want to throw
we're
out your
friends.
tags really quick while you're at it?
Hey, Hana Wu, HeyHanawu.
On
I
both?
think across everything,
Okay.
because this is what they tell you as an actor, like,
Be
keep it the
consistent.
same.
Make it easy.
Um,
So I guess my question was going to be, how do you
mhm,
approach social media, and how do you utilize it as an individual human in this world,
mhm.
uh, slash actor? I don't know.
Yeah, when I first started acting, so this was 5 years ago. Um, 5 years. Sorry. I was like,
Congratulations.
holy moly. So
Half a decade.
yeah, so I didn't have social media really. I didn't really use it before acting. And so when I started to utilize it, it was more as self-promotion, self-marketing, but I had no skills as an influencer and I had an old phone like the like super outdated smartphone with no good camera. So it was just, I think when I first started, I was just like, I have no idea how to use this thing. And I would get so caught up in, putting stuff out there that like was the highlight reel or was like my very best face. And I would feel very self-conscious because I never wanted to just show my best face. Like I just wanted to be real. And so I wanted to show, um, all of who I was, like stuff that I struggled with and, you know, bare face and, like I didn't want it to be a highlight reel,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't know how to do that and also brand myself at the same time because
Brand.
branding is like, I still don't really, so I've had like a lot of different talks with friends who are actors, but also friends who aren't actors. And in the end, it's just like, maybe just being authentic is your brand. That could be your brand. And people won't figure you out because being authentic is like, well, we're all very complex creatures, right? So I'm going to come across as very contradictory, but at least it's true to me. And so you can show like those glamorous and flashy and badass photos, but also like stay true to yourself, especially in captions, because I find myself like I'm very expressive in my writing and how I
Mm-hmm.
share of myself with writing, because as an introvert I'm much more comfortable with that. um, so I'm just like, I don't really care as much anymore. Like I still want to put myself out there. I want to promote stuff that I'm doing. I want to promote stuff that my friends are doing. um, but I kind of see it more for what it is now. So I'm not so much caught up in like likes and followers and why am I not like at like 10K? I can't even break 3K. Like that stuff is just like whatever. As long as I'm making connections, and I'm having meaningful connections with people through it. Um, that's good enough for me. Like Twitter, especially during the pandemic, I have gotten to connect with some really
Mm.
great people in the industry. I've gotten to know, like, and in a very organic way because
Through Twitter?
you
You
kind of
sure?
just see,
Just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah, yeah, because you just see like what they're doing and maybe who they like, and then you just like their stuff, and then mutual friends will like your stuff, so then they'll see your stuff, and then eventually they'll start following it. So it's just very like, it's taken years, it took years for that to start happening, but I've kind of been marveling at the friends that the people that I've come
nice.
to know through Twitter, because it's very surprising. It's not what I expected of Twitter at all, but I've like gotten connected to some
Yeah.
really great folks and even worked with some of them.
Yeah, I didn't know that was possible on Twitter. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So how, and then I know that another big aspect when I think about Instagram or your social media is your stories.
Mm.
You're very consistent with sharing stories.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a nice wide variety there too, where it's either sharing something cool a friend has done, where it's like, hey, this new trailer's out, I think it's really cool, or it's a wushu thing, or it's cute little comic book strip with some cartoons, it's really adorable, or it's cute animals,
Yes.
or it's therapist deep thoughts. Um, so how do you know what to share? How do you kind of decide what you're gonna put out there?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Sometimes I think I just like neurotically share things, especially in the morning when I'm on social media a lot and I see a lot of good stuff, because that's when I feel
Hmm.
like a lot of people post early in the morning. So when I see like, ooh, this, like, I really like this, like this post from this psychotherapist on this thing, or like it lands for me right now, it's like, wow, then I'll like share it. Or if it's like a cute animal video that made me cry or go, oh, I'm like, I'm sure somebody else will appreciate it, so I share it. So it's really funny actually. For me, it's like most of the time you'll notice I share in chunks. So I'll share like a whole bunch of stuff in like the first hour that I'm awake. And then I won't share anything for the rest of the day, or I won't share anything until like maybe mid afternoon when I'm on like really scrolling and seeing like finding good things, you know. So, but I generally just go by things that I really, really enjoy or things that make me think, and then I want to share. And then I also really like to support my friends. Like if they're doing something, I want to be like, because I like one of the things that I struggle with the most as a person and as an actor is like that whole MB comparison thing, you
Mm.
know, because I was always compared to other people disfavorably, like, you know, growing up, where it was like, why can't you be more like this person? Why can't you be more like that person? Because they're so
Mm.
good at this, or
You're
they
talking parents, school
parents
teachers, I don't know how,
parents and
coaches.
just I feel like this was in the Chinese immigrant culture, like in general, like this was just something that we that
Like,
happened as a way to motivate, right? To motivate and to like promote excellence and like help you grow, but at the same time, it just kind of always made me
is it
feel less than.
demoralizing?
Yeah, because then you just because there's always going to be people, if you break yourself into parts like that, like, oh, how you treat other people and how polite you are to your elders and piano and what college you get into, like, there's always going to be someone better than you at that one particular piece, right? And so
Yep.
you just, that just cultivates this feeling of never good enough. Like, you're never going to be good enough. And all these pieces of you are not good enough. And so, you know, something that I really try to very intentionally try to do now is to celebrate people and to like that's how I counter feelings of envy or jealousy or comparison, because in the end I want what's meant for me, right? I don't want what you have, like that's yours, that's fine. I want what's mine. So, you know, in the end it's like it doesn't help me, it doesn't make me feel good to be comparing or to be in competition with anyone. So I'd just much rather counter it by supporting people, and
Hmm.
that makes me feel better, and that actually helps me compare way less, like it then, you know.
Yeah, how do you feel about comparison with thyself? Is that because, I mean, I guess that's kind of how I see it, where it's like you said, it's not healthy to think about, well, at that other guy's age, he had already directed for this and this and this. He's made this other movie, like whatever, like all that kind of stuff. Like, how did that
Mm-hmm.
happen? Whatever. Who doesn't it doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. Kind of. Well, it's relevant in a way, but the point being is like you're on your own journey, and um, as long as I feel like I'm having some sort of upward trajectory of growth in the direction that I'm aiming for, then I'm like, all right, cool, I'm making my progress. I know more now than I did when I directed my first movie, and I feel whatever, there's growth happening. So with the self comparison, I'm like, oh, cool, it's doing great.
Yeah. And I think like that is like, that's probably one of the best ways to deal with like that whole comparison thing. Because if I want to grow, like I'd much rather it be in comparison to where I was, so that I can focus on my own journey and just stay in my own lane and not be looking at what anyone else is doing. Because again, it's like, it's kind of shooting yourself in the foot to like compare yourself to other people, because there's always going to be one, at least one, who does something earlier or
Probably
does
many.
something bigger um, but I think if and when those feelings of comparison do happen, because as much as I guard myself and just focus on my own lane, like every once in a while I'll still like see something that someone else have and be like, oh, I wish I had that. um, but as long as I'm taking that as like, okay, if I'm feeling envious of someone, then that just means that there's something about them that I actually admire or something that I want. So how can I rechannel that energy into helping me take steps to get there or to build my own skills,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I guess the only we're not gonna the only thing that I could imagine where that's probably also that could backfire too, where I'm thinking about like in the future after I've directed Avengers, and then I'm like, wait, no gigs are coming in, and then I'm comparing myself to I'm like, oh, like I'm irrelevant now. I used to be such a
Yeah.
big deal. Why can't I get back to that? So it's just the circumstances that you're in now are not the same. Whatever the stuff is, so I could, yeah. It's a whole weird thing.
It
But
is.
regardless,
It
yeah,
is. So yeah, I mean, because I feel that too. Because sometimes I feel like it's like what I said with like the lost momentum, right?
yeah,
With COVID and feeling like, wow, things were moving somewhere it seemed, and then it just stalled, for a long time, and needing to be okay with even that part of the journry.
yeah.
Yeah. So you always got to work on something.
There's no winning. I'm just kidding. No, it's great.
No
I
winning.
I think the whole
The
point.
moral of this podcast is
No, the hope is that you are able to. I'm assuming just find a way to be understanding of who you are right now and to not give yourself a hard time.
knowing how to show yourself grace, but also recognize like not all of the growth is external either, because sometimes like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot that happens underneath the surface, and maybe that growth needs to happen before you see any more external growth. So being able to remember that too, when
Yes, for sure.
again the industry looks at the external growth, right?
Yeah, let's not think about that. All right, next, we are going to talk about. I wanted to jump into a topic you brought up in your Instagram yesterday. I want to
Mm,
talk about something fresh.
okay.
I thought it was an interesting story,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought I would just dig into what you thought about it. I'm
Okay.
going to be very vague, and I'm also going to read this longer thing. You shared this story, a deep sense of aloneness in a capital world.
Mm.
Um, Now, I don't know, this doesn't really have, it kind of does. I don't know. There's a lot of things that we can branch off from this with, because I think about, let's say, I briefly mentioned that I just moved and I'm living in, I have my own space, living alone for the first time
Mm.
since moving to LA. I've lived on my own before back in Reno, but the first time since being in Los Angeles, I've usually had the roommate situation and had somebody around that I was either collaborating with or rooting for or having that back and forth, which has
Mm-hmm.
been lovely. But now I'm by myself. which is lovely in its own reasons because sometimes roommates don't work out. Um, there's also the I don't know. Okay, I'll just read some bullets. I'm just going to read everything off. I might post this on the video version as well if you want to read along. So, a deep sense of aloneness in a capitalist world. Bullet number 1, a growing awareness that social interactions have become increasingly about our possessions, our acquaintances, and small talk. And we can, I guess, talk about bullets as we go if there's thoughts on that. Because I'm sure there's thoughts on every bullet. Bullet number 2, when work takes over our lives and the constant fight to survive leaves little emotional energy for relationships, which is kind of like my biggest fear with the path that I've chosen with like crew life, because there's that whole IATSE thing that went down that kind of didn't really solve anything in the end, which is a bummer.
Yeah.
But no, it did solve some. I don't know the two specifics. The point was IATSE is the crew, the giant crew union, and the what's the thing? The quality of living uh, situations for crew with the 12-hour workday minimum. A lot of OT happens in the movie business and TV business. So when you're done with 12-hour days, you don't have
It's like
time.
you drive home and you need to sleep and then you need to drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So significant others, family kind of go to the wayside while you're in production. And it's hard to sustain relationships with that kind of time availability and energy availability. So that scares me. Bullet number 3. Oh, sorry.
That's valid.
A reliance on consumerism to fill the void. Do you relate to that?
Consumerism.
Or I guess the general thought on that, I guess they expand on it too, which I can talk about or I can read. We'll just continue. Unless you have thoughts.
Yeah,
Going quick.
Go ahead.
When social media feels like a place where we quantify our social standing, likes and follows, kind of talk about that a little bit. And it feels like with Facebook moving into the metaverse and all that kind of stuff, it's only going to become more so a sign of a quote unquote place where we do that. Final bullet on this slide, the commodification of self-care, quote unquote, as a lone endeavor that's linked to consumption. Some big words there.
Yes.
Commodification of self-care. Is that saying that there's an expectation that we must consume to feel good?
In that sense, yes. Because a lot of times, maybe in some of the more like, because self-care and psychology, these are all like really complex, really like big contextual, concepts that we're trying to apply to our lives in order to heal. So when you have a lot of like therapy accounts, which I follow a lot and I share a lot from them, so I find them very useful. But the tricky thing is to make it about like is that they can provide very reductionistic ways of viewing things like self-care, like where it's just like look out for yourself, or like get yourself a yummy treat, or like it's like a
Treat yourself.
yes, it's where it becomes like a treat yourself, like sit in the bath and like so that you're consuming something for yourself, rather than if it's like a community care thing where like it's like when it's supposed to be the community taking care of itself, that would meet the need, rather than like this self thing that I need to fix with, a piece of chocolate and a bath bomb, So like there's that piece of it where like we make self-care into something that we're consuming, rather than looking at like what is the real need here and how do I actually meet it, how do I meet it in a sustainable way where it's not just trying to like sort of feel better in one particular moment, but is there something larger going on? And then the other piece, like since the actual post is about feeling lonely, right?
Which I'll get into.
Like how like instead of maybe what we're actually needing is connection and intimacy, but we're being encouraged to
Experience something or consume. I think of
yeah,
experiential, like you mentioned the bath or the go out to eat or
yeah,
like the dopamine hits of
right.
food.
Or even consumption as in like scrolling through social media or binging shows, like that sort of
Shopping.
thing. Like those are all different ways that we consume other things in order to try to fill some kind of void, right? And it may work in the moment or it may serve as a distraction, but we're not necessarily looking at like how we're actually meeting our needs for connection and intimacy
Right.
with people. And a lot of the things that we're using may actually lead us further from what we're
So how
actually
do
wanting.
we can get a little bit
Oh gosh,
we
how
can
do we do
we can get a little bit meta with this
Yeah,
currently too, because
yeah.
right now you're listening slash watching to a podcast of us talking about this thing
Mm-hmm.
where I don't, this I do know that it can. The nice thing about podcasts and just like listening to conversation and being a part of conversation is there's that sense of connectivity that happens there, and that social interactionness that we long for this day and age, where I feel like extended conversations don't really happen commonly by default. Like having you don't sit with people and talk for 3 hours anymore these days, really. Um, but even listening to it and being here, like we are here with you right now in a way, and we enjoy that you are here with us currently. But we're not going to be with you once this ends, and you're going to be on your own, and that feeling is going to come back if, or, whatever. Like it's an interesting. So instead of just putting us on repeat and continuing to listen to us, there's other stuff going on there. Which,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, hopefully, because if the aim of like social media or, created content is to like build connection, then in the end, it still falls to the consumer to take that and go out and, either continue the conversation with someone in their life or use it to change something, right? So it can't just be like an internal shift. And I think for me, a lot, like I find myself doing that. Like when I am scrolling and I'm sharing, like when I share stuff, I think it's also because like I do, like I want to connect with people. I'm sharing things that I find interesting. And
isn't it like an excuse to start a conversation kind of
maybe,
thing?
yeah. So like
Here we are.
when people actually like text something rather than, like, I mean, I enjoy any kind of dopamine hit. So, like, if they like something or if they give me an
You
emoticon,
respond with a fire
like,
emoji. Yeah.
yeah, like, I'm going to be like, yeah. Um, but there's also something more, like, when someone's actually, like, engaging with that and then we have an actual conversation, right?
Yeah.
Um, but then like I get scared because then some people are like engaging and I'm like, I don't actually know you and I'm talking to you about all these things. So I don't know. Like sometimes it's like, okay, how do I like figure out how to engage and how to get the connection that I'm looking for? Is this really the best way to do it? But then I also get people who like, tell me like, I appreciate the kinds of things you share, And so I'm like, how do I balance this with like just wanting to share at large because I feel like maybe a lot more than just me will respond to it versus like just going directly and having conversations with people that I know and I know I can have like these deep
Yeah.
conversations with that actually meet the need that I have rather than
That's
like
a good idea.
just posting, sharing, retweeting, and like hoping
Yeah.
someone will engage me
It's
first.
I see that a lot, like let's just say like hosting a party, for instance.
Mm.
Is it always bugged me back in the day. People still do this too sometimes with like, hey, on social media they'll blast out to their followers is, hey, who wants to go see this movie? I want to see this movie. Who wants to go? And then I don't know if they're hoping for a certain someone to respond to it, or they can just be like, they could ask the people they want to go with directly versus putting it out there in the world.
You know what? That's actually like that. Because I know when I invite people to like a screening, I actually don't invite people directly. I'm kind of like, because I think
There's a fear of rejection.
yes, I think like maybe it's a fear of rejection or a fear of like placing pressure on people, or like, I don't know what it is, but for me, it's easier to just be like, this screening here at this time. If you want to come, you can come. But if not, okay.
No obligation.
Catch you next time. So maybe it is this sort of like, yeah.
It's a fear-based decision, I think. Because you can definitely say that same thing to an individual. Is, hey, Eddie, I've got the screening. It'd be awesome if you went. No pressure. You don't have to go if you're busy. It still works. And I feel more appreciated that you thought of me and you wanted me to go. And I get that hit. And then I have to politely decline because I'm busy. And it's nothing personal. And thank you so much. Like that, I feel like I'm always a fan of the direct versus the blast. But I definitely get the fear thing of, I'm having a birthday party and I'd rather not have you say you can't go or it's not a priority for you, because that's going to hurt my feelings. Because that's no fun. I'm going to cry. All right. So let's jump into, I want to read the description of this post.
Okay.
I I feel like it's definitely leaning a certain way in it. But I will bring it up after. All right, I'm going to read the full thing. Okay. This is from the.issued. Is that how you say this one? The rap.issued? The rapicid? The rapicid?
It almost seems like a play on like therapist. Like pissed. A therapist is pissed, kind of.
Therapist.
Does that make sense?
All right.
Therapist.
I did not get that. A therapist. So it's an angry therapist.
Not to be confused with The Angry Therapist, which is another account.
Oh, is that one?
There is one.
Okay. They're competing. So this caption says, do you ever feel disappointed with the world? It's one of the most unsatisfying experiences because there's no specific person or issue at play, just a deep sense that the way we live doesn't sit well. When I have these moments, I become despondent about the distress that I see around me. I feel like we are in the midst of a global mental health crisis, an epidemic of loneliness. We often look at recent changes to explain away the distress. We look at economic and technological change. We look at the recent pandemic and the effect it has. There is no doubt about the secondary implications of these, but in my opinion, it is our ideology that is the major player. There are clear evolutionary reasons for this social pain. We are ultra-social mammals whose brains are designed to connect and respond to others, yet the prevailing principle of a capitalist society is individualism. Individual effort, self-reliance, and independence are revered. We are encouraged to compete and compare. Loneliness is integral to capitalist ideology. It is the human cost of a functioning capitalist system. We use consumerism and productivity as ways of coping. This is how it is designed. I see the impact of this at all levels. Busyness and the focus on work help us to avoid our discontent. Then treating ourselves, quote unquote, in our downtime continues the job. We've been told that earning and buying makes us good citizens, quote unquote, and we feel guilty when it doesn't satisfy us. But I also see it in the ways that we interact. Is it just me, or have our social interactions become more frivolous? It's as though we've lost the emotional commitment required for friendship and the intellectual effort needed for conversation. When I have deep and meaningful interactions, I feel so thankful, but it becomes even more acutely obvious how it is otherwise missing. As a therapist, I'm also aware of how this ideology is pervasive in the therapy room with our incessant focus on individual responsibility. I find my own meaning in this world by offering a space where ideology, politics, and the permeating sense of loneliness is never ignored, There is a space for this in therapy. Whew. Great. And that there's a lot there. What are you thinking?
You go first.
Okay. I will relate to certain aspects for sure. With I always think about when I'm feeling down, the thing that always brings me back up is looking at my to-do list and checking stuff off that list. Always gets me back into a level-headed zone where I'm like, okay, I'm like making that progress. I'm being productive. I'm feeling good. I'm that's definitely, I guess, like this they're describing it here as a coping mechanism for my loneliness potentially. Just kidding. um so busyness, yeah. The thing that also intrigues me too is I'm always kind of uh, what's the word, hesitant, um with I don't know much about how to build a capitalist society or what the end goals of capitalist society are, on if a bunch of people got around the table and are like, we want to promote business, we want to promote individualism because we think people should have the rights to make decisions and vote and blah blah blah. And also we're really thinking that we should really push people to be lonely and isolated, and that'll increase the productivity of our businesses. I feel like it's more of a symptom of the society versus the goal of it, because this is described as loneliness is integral to capitalist idol. Jeez. Loneliness is integral to capitalist ideology. So I kind of got hung up on that a little bit. I'm like, is that true or is that a assertion? But regardless, those are thoughts.
Yeah, I don't think anybody really goes into like I don't think that I have this feeling that most people are not consciously thinking about like going in, this is the ideology that I want to have, and this is how I want people to feel. So I even think like in terms of like capitalism, it's just like, I mean, it's been around, since pretty much the beginning of this nation, like this concept of like free market capitalism. And yeah, I'm not like, it's been a long time. I was a sociology major in college, so like I read about all this stuff, but it's been a long time since I've read about it, and really studied it extensively. And so like I feel like there's a lot about capitalist ideology that I can't really speak to.
I mean, I just know. Okay, huh?
But I do feel like the individualism thing and then the loneliness thing as a result of it, I feel like those are byproducts of capitalist ideology, or at least like it's the result of it, but it's also like one of the markers of it, where the more like, because some people I know are talking about like late like end stage capitalism, and that's where we are right now, where like American society is right now. And that's why we're seeing like, whoa, because we can look back and say like the ways that our economy, that our market, the way that we approach um our economy like has led to an increase in like individualism and like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, and like like survival of the fittest and all of those things. And that's led to, especially with the introduction of like technology being where it's gotten to, that it's led to even more isolation. And so I feel like there's sort of like, it's kind of like, to me, I kind of describe it as like a pendulum swing where it's like it's kind of heading in this direction. And so as we are realizing that like, well, we're realizing some of the traps of capitalism, or some of the traps of individualism, like we want to like try and go back to the other direction. So I find it interesting because when I was a therapist, I would notice that a lot of clients who would have coping skills that may feel extreme. Like if I speak for myself, like perfectionism and approval seeking and being a people pleaser and having a really hard time saying no to people and establishing my boundaries, I'm like over here. And then when I started to heal, I started to have to like swing the pendulum almost over in the opposite direction, so that I was like saying no a lot, like, and all the time. And I almost needed to like swing it in the opposite direction because I needed to know what that felt like, or at least it felt like to me I was going to the extreme in the opposite direction before, and we go kind of back and forth before we settle in a spot. And so I've actually been noticing these like swings a lot in our society. So we like it's like we gravitate towards the extremes, and then we don't settle. And so we gravitate towards all or nothing thinking on
Yeah.
one side or the other.
Yes.
And then we even like take one side, and then we look at the other side as dangerous, and anybody representing the other side as dangerous. So
Yep.
then we end up even making enemies, right? It's not just being lonely, but then we actually end up making enemies of like. So for me, I don't know that I don't know if because this is a new account, that Instagram post, like it's a new account to me, and so I don't really know where this person is coming from. But I think when I read that, and the reason that I shared it is because like there has been like this underlying loneliness and desire for connection that I've been feeling that I don't really have like the words to describe. And I can't really find the source of it, except that like the more that I, live and try to
Mm-hmm.
connect, especially through like the social media platforms and through our technology, the more that I find like I'm not satisfied, like it
Yeah.
doesn't satisfy that need.
I'm gonna ask a question.
Okay.
When thinking back on life,
Hmm.
when do you feel the most satisfied or connected?
When I
I
feel
have my answer, but
your
I'm
answer.
putting you on the spot.
For me, it's when if I think about like so three things actually, or three like the first is like when I am with like my lifetime friends, I think. Like or people that I know like I am very, very close to.
Mm-hmm.
Um or
Yeah, people on your close friends list on Instagram. Yeah. Yeah.
well, yeah, like essentially, like like time spent with close friends, um, and just just simply having conversations, right? Like the people that you can talk for hours with, even if you don't see them all the time. Like when you talk, like you don't have to have a facade with them. You can be yourself. Um, the second is actually being on set.
Yep, that was
even
my
though
answer.
even though a lot of times it's like I may not like these are sometimes they're like complete strangers, like you don't even know them,
Usually.
but you're doing something like you're doing your thing, the thing that makes you feel most alive. And I think when you can do that, and it's for me being on set, especially because you're collaborating with like a whole group of people to make something happen, and I just adore that.
Yeah, because you're doing that, and everybody else around you is doing that thing that they do, and that brings them most alive as well.
Mhm.
It kind of harkens back to, I feel like, way back in the hunter-gatherer days of humans, where there's like a
Mhm.
task at hand,
Mhm.
and we're just in our own little bubble world,
Yeah.
and this is the task, and nothing else matters, and we're just trying
Mhm.
to survive and make our thing,
Mhm.
and we all have our individual jobs providing to the village,
Mhm.
and we all feel completed and
Mhm.
needed, and
Mhm.
yeah, so
Everybody does their part, and you're working towards a common goal. And it's also, yeah, just doing something that you love.
And it's a very in the moment task as well, where you're
Yes.
you're forced
Yes.
to, like, as an actor especially,
Mm-hmm.
you're not supposed to be aware. You're supposed to like separate everything else and just be there interacting with your scene
Mm-hmm.
partner and react
Mm-hmm.
authentically and
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff. So it's just like everybody's just in the moment, and it's beautiful. It's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
you have a third thing, or did you have more on set?
Well, third thing is wushu. Just
Mm,
having a practice. But for me also, like, wushu is like it's in class. Like, I'm in class with people that we're also working towards something, right? And we
mhm.
have someone leading us. We have a teacher that's kind of leading us towards getting better and growth. But it's a lifestyle practice. And I guess all three of them have in common for me, what we were talking about for said is you have the people there that you have to be present with. And the fact that you're either having a conversation, like you're either working things out for life together, or you're like working together to meet a goal to get somewhere. And so maybe it's like being able to be present with fellow travelers. I don't know. Like, if I want to like totally boil it down to like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the presentness is a big part of it for sure.
Mhm.
Is how I boiled it down in my mind, where
Mm.
it's normally if you're in the moment with somebody and you kind of forget world and you're just kind of there,
Mhm.
it just feels better than
Mhm.
getting in your head and thinking about the past and doubts and regrets and where you're
Mhm.
not currently and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Mhm.
Great. I wanted to bring that up in terms of that copeness kind of thing.
Yeah.
Did you want to see it? Okay. Um, we are also in reference to this as well, because I was going to say on the capitalist side too. The thing that I thought about when I read this was, again, that I don't imagine. I don't know. Maybe there is such a thing as, the big. There's the Illuminati or whatever. There's some organization out there that's controlling the shifting. There's somebody's making decisions out. I don't think that's the case. I think more like, let's talk about Facebook, for instance, where there is Facebook, and then they have Instagram, and they have all this other stuff. And then the pandemic happens, and they see an uptick on their usage of every single thing that they own, and their growth has grown exponentially. And they're like, oh my gosh, people are spending more time than ever before on all of our platforms. And they're doing it because there's this encouragement of isolation, don't go out, hide, be in fear of the outside, stay in and escape into the social media sphere. So then I could think like, oh my gosh, like that wasn't the intention of the pandemic,
Mhm.
but capitalizing on it is something that capitalists companies are just trying to exploit. Is like, how do we get people to sleep less so they can spend more time watching stuff? How can we expand on the stomach so people can eat more of our food, or like
Mhm.
whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
So for them, uh, in the moving into like the metaverse and stuff, is like, oh, people, or the divisive nature, people spend more time on our platform when they're arguing rather than getting along. So how do we
Mhm.
exploit that? And then how do we keep people in their room alone but still connecting with people? And can they do it through our platform? Let's introduce this virtual
Mhm.
reality metasphere space where they can design their own home and they can hang out with people all day, but they're doing it through our thing.
I feel like I've seen movies about this with that same.
Premise.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that to say that I don't think there's a master plan, but humans are good at seeing a trend and trying to exploit it. But
Yeah. So I think maybe that whole the part of capitalism is, the drive to make money and to seize opportunities to make money without necessarily thinking through, well, what are the ramifications to people, and the society that we want and to culture. And so I think for me, it's just like I don't really necessarily have like I love social media and I love connecting. I really love connecting through like
Just in
DMs.
any way.
Yeah, like DMs and having conversation. In fact, what I've found is that like it's easier for me to get to know people through like messaging first. And that's happened with a lot of like my close friends is that like we start out with
That's how we started out too.
yeah, like that's just I don't know if it's maybe it's a safer way. I think of it as a safer way to get to know someone at first, but also for me as an introvert, um, it takes me a long time to process things, like, and I like to be able to have like time to think through things. And so it's just easier for me and it feels safer to interact with people. Like I hate talking on the phone. Even with like good friends, I hate talking on the phone. So nobody, no, like don't take it personally, friends. But it's just, so I feel like with anything, any tools, right? You can use it for good and you can use it for evil.
Yeah.
And you can use it mindlessly. So if you
intent.
Yeah, so if you like think it through like and be mindful about how you're using something and constantly be like evaluating like how is it helping me versus how is it like maybe getting me further away from what I really want, and deciding how you want to use it and who you want to be on it, then I think that there's a lot of good that it can do because we were forced to connect largely through social media during the pandemic.
It's still happening, but
yeah. So it's like if that is, maybe one of the main ways that we connect, then like how do we want to use it to connect then? Without it destroying our souls or our society, right? So if we can be more mindful about it and use it more intentionally and take breaks when we need it, that's also key. Be able to take breaks and step away when we need to. That's a whole big other thing.
That's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. All right. I will jump in. I'm just going to rattle off a bunch of topics. This is from another account that you follow that you've shared from the.holistic.psychologist.
Yes.
I went to their account and just looked through stuff, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of interesting things here. I forget which one you shared specifically, but I did notice that you are a follower of them.
Yes.
Okay. And let me know if there's anything here that you want to expound on. Topic number 1. Childhood shaping our beliefs and reactions and behavior. I was curious on childhood and what years that is, what childhood means was something I was curious about. Like when childhood ends, or when our beliefs are shaped, like that kind of stuff. I was kind of curious about. Uncomfortable conversations, forgiveness, becoming conscious of our nervous systems, and learning to regulate.
Yeah.
So all of that. Yeah,
all of it.
so we can talk about little bits of each or thoughts overall. The nervous system thing, because I think about, because I have a friend of the show. Her name's Nora Brocklocker. She was on the podcast. She's a marriage and family therapist, and she likes to contextualize certain things in the like the chakras and talk through it in that way.
Yeah.
And I remember her referencing that there's a saying like the mind over matter, that kind of distracts from actually understanding your system and becoming one with like your body sends signals, and to not really disregard them, because there's the thought of like I can power through this pain and conquer the thing if I just ignore what my body is telling me, I can get it done. It's like, or you can listen to your body, become one with it, and learn to work with thyself,
Yes.
and that kind of thing. So
Yeah, that's a really huge thing, and I think that that particular therapist on that account, she works a lot with trauma. And
hmm
so what we know about trauma, especially trauma that happens like early on, because like our relationships and the ways that we were raised, as children, so like even from as early as like birth, we are being
right.
shaped because we're growing so much, right? Developing so much. So all of that like leaves an imprint, because when you're a child, like we're pretty helpless, like we're pretty much like blank, so everything that we learn is taught to us, whether directly um, by parents, teachers, so like whatever relationships there are around us, or indirectly, like just being in our culture and having that environment act on us.
Yeah, the senses are picking stuff up 24/7. So
Yes.
mhm.
So things will impact us like when we have certain needs that aren't being met, like whether it's physical or whether it's emotional, or when our senses are overwhelmed by a trauma and we feel unsafe, in a situation where we have to fight for survival. Um, all of that shapes our body and our brain, and so therefore our nervous system. And so for some of us, like we're more sensitive, we can be more sensitive to certain things going on in the environment around us than other people. And so, like for me, like I know I'm a very highly sensitive person, which means like sounds and crowds, especially, can like make me dysregulated, like
hmm
my nervous system. So like I actually feel it in my body. Like I actually want to run away. So that's like fight or flight. Like sometimes when I get overwhelmed, like I have these sensations in my body and it's telling me like it is time to go,
hmm
or I need quiet, or
It's
I
like
need,
it's like you're good. That's
So like learning to recognize how our nervous system is and recognize what its responses are and why we respond in the way that we do, like that's all of that particular therapist work. A lot of therapists work in that way if they work with trauma.
hmm
And I think in a day and age where a lot of times it feels like we're in crisis all the time, um, all
hmm
of us are a little bit more like our nervous systems are tend to be more reactive, right? So like it's not at rest. When we're at rest, we can think critically, we can evaluate things, we can like it's easier for us to have empathy because we can take on other people's perspectives. But when our nervous system is in like that stressed fight or flight mode, then we're not really all we're thinking of is how do I survive this? Not necessarily like
I think of like traffic and people in their cars. Like it gets stressful out there just trying to survive the roads, and you're
mhm,
going at high speeds and you're like
mhm.
high danger. So that's why road rage comes up, and people they have very difficult times empathizing with other drivers.
Yes, that is true. Yeah, that's a great example. So it's like it's the difference between having like a activated nervous system versus having a calm nervous system. Like if you go into driving in like a zen mode where it's like, okay, I'm going to drive defensively and get to where I need to get to when I get to it.
Yeah,
And
there's no
if other
rush.
people are cutting me off or like doing weird, weird, strange things, it's like maybe they're having a bad day instead of.
That's me every day. That's me every day. I just bought a little tiny car. I don't. It's out front.
Mm-hmm.
I have a little Fiat 500 now. It's a little
Mm.
baby car, little toy car,
Baby.
and people do not like it on the road. Because I drive like a grandpa too, so I'm in no hurry. So I deal with that nonstop. I'm like, well, I'm getting on the road. I'm leaving on time. I'm not worried, but everybody else is in speed racer
Seem
mode
to
over
be
here.
in a hurry
Yeah, it's
or
Los Angeles.
sensitive. Yes.
Sorry.
I forget the first. Okay, so like you asked about childhood as well.
Yeah, there's that, and there's also forgiveness.
Mm.
The power of forgiveness, and potentially could tie into uncomfortable conversations is kind of an assumption here. But yeah.
Yeah. Uncomfortable conversations. Oh gosh. So all of these are like
Yeah,
big,
like
giant, huge,
what
complex
is a
topics.
common, just off the top of your head, a common uncomfortable conversation that you feel uh, is, I mean, a common uncomfortable conversation that people often need to be told to have. It's like maybe you should have that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about having that conversation? Like, I feel like there's probably some top 3 list of conversations people don't want to have.
Yeah. I think,
It feels like a family thing for sure.
yeah, well, I mean, I think anytime, depending on your toleration of feeling vulnerable, right? Anytime someone hurts you, like, okay, top of my head, like a boundary. If you need to set a boundary with someone because you feel they have invaded you or like whatever, I feel like that's a really hard conversation for a lot of people is how to set a boundary with others. Um, you need to say no to something. You need to turn someone down because you're going through all of those like questions of like, oh no, will they feel rejected or like, or are they not going to like me anymore? Or, like whatever.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to set boundaries. That's an
Yeah.
uncomfortable conversation.
I was going to take it back to the actor manager dynamic
Yeah.
with I was just yelled at by you last phone call and we can't have that. Or you were talking about the acceptance thing too and saying no to gigs or whatever the stuff. I don't know. That's more of a I those are I don't know. Those are
Yeah, like being able to have those conversations and tolerate the and be able to tolerate your own feelings about around that topic, right? So if you can tolerate like being rejected, if you can tolerate like um I don't know, that person may not like your response, or may not like that boundary or, whatever, but being okay with like, so being able to like stay present with yourself in the midst of that conversation and also stay true to your own boundaries. So that's one. I feel like setting boundaries is really
mm-hmm.
good, difficult conversation. Number two is just sharing. If somebody angers you or hurts you, and being able to have an actual conversation about that. And then for the other person to actually be able to hear that you angered someone and or hurt them and not get defensive. So I feel like that's something that happens like all the time.
Those are tough.
That's
They're not only
really
uncomfortable, but those are difficult to orchestrate.
they are because
Okay.
it requires like two people being able to regulate emotions and come together with a larger common goal, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
not just trying to like you're trying to repair the relationship essentially.
Yeah.
Or
I've
repair
been
something
there.
that,
I've
yeah,
been
repair
there.
something that went wrong in the relationship. That's hard.
Yeah, 'cause it's tough because I can think of I don't have to I'm not going to bring them up specifically, but I know interactions that just it brings me back to just like being in an ultra sensitive space and getting into that. All right, I just have to voice this and I have to control this and I have no control over you,
Mm-hmm.
but you're here right now and I'm just going to say these things and hopefully you're receiving it. And then there's the defensiveness and then there's a little bit of like a little bit of reiteration because sometimes it takes a little bit of a you
Yeah.
gotta it's like no
Yeah.
I really want to are you hearing like the
Yeah. I know. I know that like these are all hard. And then maybe like the very obvious one is like trying to talk about politics when you are on opposing sides,
mm-hmm.
right? Like that
It's weird, huh?
so hard.
This is whenever politics comes up,
Mm-hmm.
it's not that it comes up often, but I always wonder I don't like labels.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how much of that could be cured, for instance, quote unquote cured, if there was a new Supreme Court law or some sort of constitutional amendment that says, on forever on ballots forever, and whatnot, no party, you can't list the party of the person.
Mm.
Like if the House and the Senate and all the parties were stripped from everybody's name and you couldn't colorize people, like how
Mm-hmm.
things would change and nobody knew what parties they landed in, if that would be helpful in any capacity.
Yeah.
Or if you had to go to the polls and vote for president or your governor, and there was no party there and you actually had to listen to what their stances were, people still find a way to label, but
Yeah, I think that's one of the hard things is that we do have that tendency to label because we need quicker ways to understand.
to hate each other, yeah. It's like, are you red or blue? Okay, yeah, I don't like you. Next. I'm just kidding.
Well, the problem with that piece that I find is that the things that we are taught to believe about what that label represents, right? So if it's not someone that is in our tribe, then we are told how to think and how to feel about those people. Or we just like we're given the beliefs about those people without actually having talked to them first, right? So I think that label piece is like, yes, I understand our human nature to want to like be able to categorize things very quickly because our world is so complex that like it's just sometimes it's just too much. But at the same time, when we let those labels stand and forget that like the humanity of people, then I feel like that's where we get into.
The funny thing is, so get into what?
No, go
Sorry.
ahead.
No,
I
say
mean,
it.
a big mess, right? Like where we are today,
No,
basically.
I just think it's interesting because I just say, if if you put two people on a podium and they had an extended debate, a nice productive one where they talked about, it's impossible. This is a fantasy world, of course, and people in the audience or watching on TV didn't know. Like if we were just blind individually watching the thing and we're like, who do we want more? Who do I more trust to lead? As I pick this person. And then they were like, the blindfold was taken off. And they're like, oh, that person was actually this. I was like, oh, really? I'm a red, but I voted blue. Or I'm a blue and I voted red. Like if they just didn't know, who people would, I think, vote a little bit better if they weren't
Yeah, or
given the shorthand excuse.
right.
Anyway, I don't know.
Well, because of
That's
all
just a
of the
lot.
meanings that we attach to the labels, right? Or the and it's not just that, but also um the pressure to conform,
Mm-hmm.
you know, like to an in group that you have to conform to all of our beliefs, that we have to be like this one solidified unit instead of be able to like have some differing views, you know, that like I don't know. I think it's just the allegiance that some people want or expect you to have to a certain thing, so that if you dive like if you're like diverging from it, then we have to be careful with you because you might start looking more and more like that other
Are you
side.
with us or are you with them?
Yeah.
That's
So
one of the lines in the West Side Story trailer. Because he was falling for the other side, the girl on the other side, and like, are you with us? And then he's like, well, I'm in love with the girl. Either way, that's
yeah. So
um,
I think we've sort of lost our ability to hold complexities and
have we? Or are you talking we as a United States of America society?
yeah,
It's a
like just
bummer.
kind of
It's a bummer.
as a whole in our society, it's just very, very hard.
What
But I feel like, those times it's like, again, when you can actually have one-on-one conversations with someone like that's when you can find common ground or common humanity, or like when someone who was a label to you becomes a human to you.
I mean, I love those little YouTube videos where they put like a Democrat and Republican in a room together and not tell them what the study is. Like the task is just like build this thing together.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like buddy buddy and they get the job done and they're getting along and they have the common ground and there's no issues whatsoever. And then at the end of it, they're like, oh, by the way, this person, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, I would not have treated you that way if I would have known that up front
Mm-hmm.
because they're both like, whatever. So it's, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I feel like I try really hard to not see things in that way
Mm-hmm.
with the listen first and benefit of the doubt. And normally we have more in common than we have. I think we have more in common in a general state than topics we disagree on with people. Is my gut.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that most people actually all want the same thing. It's just determining how to solve the problem is where semantics kind of get a little bit lost. It's like, no, we all want to be happy here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever the case is. And it's like, yeah, no, I
Yeah.
want my kids to be smart too. Or whatever, you know.
I think that's true, that in a lot of ways we want the same things.
That's it's a classic thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a lot left on the list. However, we're not going to get to a lot of it. I did want to ask you, since you are aware of the list, one more good topic we can jump into. Do you want to look through? There is we can talk about, because you're not in the dating world, so that would just be me venting about the process currently. Because
You want to know?
no. I'll save that for somebody else. There's triggered and how not to be. It's not really something that you talk about much, but I'm not sure what your relationship is with meditation. We could talk more about wushu. The negatives can be positives. Your experience with perfectionism, because you kind of brought that up a little bit, but what that looks like. There's also
open, whichever one
what
you just go like eeny, meeny,
okay.
miny, mo.
I'm trying to gauge on what, because yeah. What do you want to hear, audience? Oh, okay, great. We will talk about let's talk about perfectionism
Okay.
and what that looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and the pluses and minuses and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know. I feel like there's pluses to it for sure. Maybe not. I don't know what I'm saying.
Tell me what your thoughts are on the
I'm not too familiar with the full wide scope of what perfectionism looks like. I think more about like the schooling aspect, where it's like it's probably creates a good student. Like they're I don't like making sure that all the studying is done, making sure that all the books are read, making sure that the preparedness is there to show up, because I'm a perfectionist and I want all my T's, my I's dotted and my T's crossed. Is that what they say?
Mm-hmm.
But I am very much not in the perfectionist camp. I am very much like, what do we need to get this thing done? And am I happy with it? And is this thing like, that's kind of my struggle with filmmaking, I guess in general too, is you're never gonna have the time really to get the perfect shot or or get the perfect take or whatever. So it's kind of like, are we good to move on? Okay, is that good enough? Everybody on the same page with, are you good? Okay, you're good too.
Yeah.
No, I can do better. Okay, let's go again. Or that was perfect. Directors say that a lot too. It's a lie. I'm just kidding. Um,
Now we know.
no, stuff is good.
I feel like with perfectionism, I differentiate it from like having really high standards or from like um, being someone who's very motivated and driven to succeed. I differentiate it from like being someone who pursues excellence. To me, perfectionism is this sort of like, there's a lot of shame attached to it because there's no such thing as perfect. We know it, like that's like it doesn't exist, but we feel compelled to be that. So it leaves you in this perpetual state of not good enoughness. So this
Okay.
constant state of like shame and worthlessness about yourself unless you can live up to this impossible standard.
Is it more of a internalistic journey versus how did what?
I think it translates into external because, then like if well, I mean it can transfer in two ways, right? Because so you can have the high super high achieving like golden child kind of, so you can by all intents and purposes look like wow, that you're like the perfect student, daughter, whatever, anything,
Mm-hmm.
that like you're so you can often perform that way, but underlying you just don't, and then sometimes you can get to a point where you become like a discouraged perfectionist where you're just like, I know it's impossible and I feel so bad about myself that like I can't reach that, so I procrastinate or I just can't finish projects, or because I'm so burdened by the pressures of it that I know I cannot meet it, and so then I feel bad about myself. And what I found about perfectionists is that it's almost this like inability to tolerate mistakes, um, extreme high criticism of self, which sometimes then can also become like high criticism like of others, and it just becomes like this rigid way of being where like you basically can't tolerate your own humanness. Like you can't make mistakes and you can't
Mm-hmm.
fail and you
Mm-hmm.
can't, like rejection is terrible, and like so it can become like such a rigid thing that like it completely gets in your way, you know and other people can still look at you and see like,
Yeah.
wow, you're like this stellar like performer, high achiever, and I wish I could be like you, but then inside it's like, you're like, like you struggle with all of this like imposter syndrome, and because no matter how good people like think you are, you haven't hit the mark of perfect. You
Mm-hmm.
right, because you're aware of like where you fall short of that. And so I think for me, when I talk about being like a recovering perfectionist, and why it's so hard is because it's actually like being a perfectionist is something that society tends to see as like a positive thing. Like if you're going to have like a coping skill, like, and your coping skill is perfectionism, that looks great to society, right?
Sure.
And society will actually like positively reinforce that, like, like, well, we'll take that. We'll take you striving. We'll take you working
Mm-hmm.
extra hard. We'll take like all of that because, again, that looks good in a capitalist world.
Right. You're
Um,
you're producing, and at the end of
yeah,
the day, yeah, you're producing.
yeah.
So that's kind of
You're
all that matters in that
yeah.
world.
Yes, but then in the end, like a lot of perfectionists end up struggling a lot with depression because they don't
Yeah, the lack of self-worth in there,
they
yeah.
don't see that about themselves. Um, and they haven't really cultivated then what their worth is and maybe even what they want to do and who they are because they're so fixated on like the performance,
And I could see
Mhm.
the comparison thing jumping in too, because
Yeah.
perfection, I feel like, is solely based off of what what is the most high achieving thing out there, or what is perfect. What if you're the only person in the world and you're stuck on the island? It's hard to, with no social media
Mhm.
account, and
Mhm.
you're a perfectionist, it would be a lot easier of a world, I think, too, where it's like, well, there's nothing to
Yeah,
compare it
yeah, yeah.
to.
This is fine. It's just me here.
So
I think I'm doing all
yeah, I
right.
could see
Mhm.
the external factors
Yeah.
kind of just making it worse.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's the problem of it.
Okay.
And that's why I'm like constantly realizing, so for me it's to recover from it is to allow for mistakes, allow for failures, allow for like my flaws and my weaknesses and accepting that I'm human
Mm-hmm.
and that so that's like my ongoing work all of the time. And so a lot of times like, I feel, and this is something that I wrote about in like my posts about perfectionism, is feeling like I'm constantly needing to hold myself together. So I always need to be put together, and then if I'm posting something, like I'm very carefully crafting it, so it's like I'm very aware of like how I'm like I have a way
Mm-hmm.
of like how I want to come across to the world, right? Like how people want to perceive, like how I want people to perceive me. And so then when, if I need to break down or when I'm like not doing well, then I can have a lot of judgment towards myself. But if like the practice of this year is okay, there's actually been like a couple instances where I've had like, an anxiety attack in front of other people, or where I haven't been able to control um like my anxiety, or I'm crying in front of people, or I'm needing other people's help, and um like that's just extremely extremely uncomfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can like, but at the same time it feels so human, and that those instances have actually allowed for some like incredible moments of connection that I haven't allowed for myself before. So, if we're tying it back all together with like connection and not feeling lonely, it's like, yes, if I'm trying to be perfect and I'm trying to constantly perform and I'm constantly trying to hold myself together, then I'm actually, not giving myself those moments to truly have those human connections with people where I have to be vulnerable and let people respond to that, and
Right.
even help me, and take care of me in that moment. Like it's incredibly uncomfortable, but
Yeah, because you have to. I could see it. Yeah, you have to be in an environment in which you are being accepted, and there's the direct um, evidence that, oh, my flaws that I'm deeply self-conscious of are
mm-hmm.
currently being shown, and everybody here is accepting of me regardless.
Yeah.
Like that needs to be felt, and probably
Yeah.
felt regularly, to kind of
Mm-hmm.
come to have that hammered into this brain that's like, it's
Yeah.
okay, be
Yes,
cool,
it's okay. You're okay. Like that's what it
everybody loves me, it's
is.
cool, stop it.
No, that's exactly. It's like you're okay. You're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well then, lovely. Great. Well, I am going to wind us down.
Okay.
Um, I have enjoyed our conversation. It's been
Same.
great to see
Me
you.
too.
I only see you twice a year these
I
days.
know.
Um, No, but very cool. So what I talked a little bit about 2022, but is there anything I'll just ask this basic question here. Where can people follow you to keep up with everything Hana Wu so they can be in the know on what's going on and support like projects you're part of, or if there's anything that you've got cooking that you want to plug or whatever. I don't know. It's a thing.
I would say probably Instagram is still the best way to kind of keep up with what I'm doing in the day to day. Twitter is kind of like random thoughts that I'll just put out in the void and,
Mm-hmm.
like,
This could be fun.
which could be fun, yes. But I'm a very wordy person, and so the character limitations on Twitter can sometimes be a little challenging. But I enjoy Twitter a lot for like just connecting with people in the industry and supporting them. And then like probably Instagram is still the most self-promoty kind of thing. But I do try to throw in a lot of like hedgehogs and puppy videos
Yeah.
to
And then just to clarify, that is at Hey Hana Wu.
Hey Hana Wu.
Great.
And next year, I am looking forward to getting my black belt in wushu. That's going to
Ooh.
happen. It will
Ooh.
happen.
This,
That's the goal.
wow.
And then one of my best friends is making a film that he's been co-writing for many years now, just basically as long as I've known him. And I met him when I started acting pretty much. And I get to help him make his film. And that is
Yes.
going to be fun.
Yeah, I saw you post. Yeah, because you're currently attached just to act in this film, right? That's what, or is that the case, or what's your connection? Yeah.
Yes, currently. But I mean, haven't really talked about it too much yet, but yeah, but that's happening. It's gonna happen.
You want to say the name of the film or the filmmaker?
We'll wait on that. You gotta follow me.
Oh,
You gotta
okay.
follow me.
Follow Hannah.
Follow me to find out.
Great. Okay. Well, we shall end it there. Thanks so
Okay.
much for. Oh, I guess I should say the last things. If you enjoy the conversation and you're a fan of the podcast, please subscribe. Give a thumbs up.
Like.
Leave a like.
Like.
I don't know.
Ring
Leave
the
a rating.
bell.
I don't know. Whatever you're on, that'd be helpful. Cool. Otherwise, bye.